So hello to Jasmine Salazar. I will let her introduce herself technically, but we at Spirit Fire like to introduce how much we really care about the people that we interview. And Jasmine is the person who introduced the two founders of Spirit Fire, Luis Torres and myself, when she had known some of the writings I had done. And Luis, who's from Brooklyn and knows Jasmine, um, was looking for more beyond the diocese, and Jasmine sent him in my direction. Of course, I got a telephone call from this guy. I trusted Jasmine and this other survivor, and he was determined to have coffee when he drove through Virginia. And I'm an introvert, so I was thinking, what kind of survivor was out looking to talk to people? We're supposed to be hiding. So that begins how Luis helped my life too. But Jasmine, maybe you can tell people the more technical facts about what is your job right now, and then we'll just start talking about your story.
Sure thing. So I'm Jasmine Salazar, Victim Assistance Coordinator and Vice Chancellor of the Diocese of Brooklyn.
Thank you. And Jasmine, what we're going to do, and I think we've talked about this a bit, and our Catholic story, what we're doing is we're taking the approach that survivors have kind of healed from constructing our own stories from the bits and shards of what we remember, and we're inviting all Catholics to do the same as a church. So we're starting to listen to people's stories. And so it's kind of approaching it like a snapshot. So I thought I would start by naming some decades, and you can kind of tell us what you were doing, what you were thinking, and we'll just talk about decade by decade. And because you're just a young thing, I'll only go to 1990s to see where was Jasmine and what were you doing?
Sure. So in the 1990s, I was in high school.
Oh,
Yes, I was in high school, and I was working at a rectory, and yeah, just doing my studies and working at the rectory and really getting to know the inner workings of what a parish is like,
yeah.
on that administrative level.
But in the 1990s, we had just the beginnings of different court cases popping up in the news. Um, I was much older and wiser at that time than you were, and but you've exceeded both. I mean, at least in wisdom. But but you know, as the lawsuits started to come up, they hit me because I was looking for them. How did it? How was it in the 1990s as a teen with this stuff kind of bubbling up, but not hugely?
So I would say, as a teen, I was not really aware of what was going on in the world, in the news. I wasn't really watching that, but I was aware of what my world was. And I did become aware in my teen years
Mm-hmm.
of priests involved, that behavior involved misconduct towards minors. And so, I think my main focus at that time, because like I said, I'm a teenager and it's really about my world. So I was more focused on developing ways to keep myself safe, as well as my friends who were working with me.
Mm-hmm. And then as you went, as any teen, you're progressing, you're going into choosing your career, your schooling. Um, I guess you started really early in your in kind of caring professions in social work areas. Can you tell us what you then moved into professionally?
Sure. So because I grew up in the church, and I was heavily involved in like youth ministry, um, one of the religious brothers who I was very close to at the time, he was like almost like a father figure to me. He, you're trying to figure out, okay, what is it that I want to do with myself? And he had kind of planted the seed. Well, why don't you, he was like, I would see you as a good social worker. Why
Wow.
don't you explore that a little bit? And I became very curious. I was very curious of that. And when I first began my studies, I went into psychology because there was not a social work track as a BA when I started. And well, it was right in line. It was in the social services. It was something
Yeah.
that very much caught my interest. And as soon as I finished my BA, I went straight into social work school.
And boy, you really, I mean, from there, you really have done a lot of different things, and it gets us closer to another decade. Let's talk about the 2000s. By 2001, we had the Spotlight series on the really, really showing the systemic issues in the Archdiocese of Boston. But also there were a lot of other articles coming out. It was the whole the idea. A scandal is a weird word, but the idea of abuse within the church was starting to really become something people were paying attention to. You're very young still. Um, what was your life like in the 2000s? What were you doing professionally? What were you doing in the church?
Sure. So it started in the late 1990s and then into the 2000s. It was one of my first jobs in the social service area. And that's when I was working at I believe it was one of the first sex offender clinics, outpatient sex offender clinics. So I was working at an outpatient sex offender clinic. And then shortly after that, I started working within the courts with victims of domestic violence and victims of sexual assault. So, and I was heavily involved in ministry as well, always really involved in the church. But although I was beginning and definitely had an interest in this area of where there were perpetrators and those that were victimized, I think my focus was more with the populations I was dealing with at that time. And because like I said, I was involved in ministry, but I was kind of like sheltered, I think, still. Although, I had my experiences in the early 90s, those experiences were more like personal experiences rather than what was going on as a whole in the church. So in my professional career, I went from offenders, working with survivors, but yet I was not exposed to offenders and survivors within the church.
It's really powerful because you were immersed in the social trends of abuse, both in terms of victims and offenders. It was what you saw day to day from a profession point of view, although I think of it as a vocation with you even then. Um, but so you knew the profile of the offender, you knew the the scholarship behind that, and you knew what victims were going through. And one of the things you've mentioned about that time to me too is you became keenly aware of the impact of abuse on the families of victims. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely, because shortly after I left working with survivors in the courts, I started working in child welfare. And so I was working with families and with children who had been victimized. And so it wasn't only the impact it had on the child, but it was also the impact that it had on the siblings, on the parents, and and it's the lifelong impact because if I could have started with someone at a young age and saw them through development, and you see the impact of the abuse throughout their life as well as in the parents, and in their siblings who were not abused.
Yeah,
And so there's survivor's guilt at times there as well.
yeah,
Not survivor's guilt, but yeah, survivor's guilt. So I didn't go through it, but I'm seeing someone else that went through it. So those are some of the dynamics that I was able to witness. But then, once I started working for the church, then for the diocese, then I started seeing the impact of the now adult survivor of child abuse and on the family, the new family that they established.
yeah. Yeah, that is a very powerful statement and an amazing witness across the course of your work, that it also, from the Spirit Fire point of view, we remind Catholics that we're part of the Catholic family. And the story that we're seeking to tell is to say that all members of the family of the Catholics have been hurt by this. It seems like a big leap for people when they first talk to us, but understanding the ripple effect of abuse is important. And that brings us to the end of the 2000s. I'm not sure exactly the date of it, but at some point in there, you started to be drawn into help in the church. Talk to me how you made the first step of bringing all of your now by now over a decade of experience to bear in the church struggle with abuse within its walls.
Sure. Once I graduated with my master's degree and I continued working in child welfare and I continued my involvement in the church and ministry, I always, and I always used to say this, to whoever I had an opportunity to speak with about, my professional growth and my faith. I always said, like, I wish there was a way that I could take my professional training and my faith and work with it together. Obviously, as a social worker, my faith I always carry my faith with me, but within the Catholic Church, that's what I wanted to figure out a way to do that. And then, I feel God was preparing me all along the way, but with the journey that I took, but through ministry, I came to know the chancellor of the diocese. And it was at that time that he had just been appointed chancellor of the diocese and wanted to restructure the way the chancery was running in the Diocese of Brooklyn. And he had heard that I was a social worker. And he thought it was important to bring in a social worker, a layperson, into the chancery to begin working with issues around sexual abuse.
And just understanding it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think people underestimate, in my experience, the number of lay people with exceptional skills that have been tapped by certain dioceses. I'm not saying it's every diocese. It's not like you got a PR release that they're now using your brain and your experience, but there you were. And then over time, I mean, job to job, what's really important is about at some point you became the victim assistance coordinator who was working with now all of the victims within the Diocese of Brooklyn. And that does include Queens, right?
Yeah, Brooklyn and Queens.
So, talk about what it's like to be a victim assistance coordinator. And a lot of people don't even know what they are. And it isn't a really easy title to figure out if you don't know this work. Can you just talk a bit about the role before we talk about Brooklyn?
Sure. So my understanding of the role of victim assistance coordinator, you are, if not the first contact, the follow-up contact for when a survivor first reaches out and says, I need to report what happened to me. So sometimes I'm the first contact, and sometimes I am in contact after the report has been filed.
Yeah.
And so the role is to, explain that I am here. I do work for the diocese, but I am here to inform you of the way the system kind of works. But even more important, I'm here to provide care if you're open to it.
Yeah.
And then care, and I would explain the different levels of care that I can offer.
Yeah. And part is, as people can't always understand, is how important the victim assistance coordinator is to survivors who really do want to even explore what it would be like to reconnect with the faith, or even explore what it would be like to feel their own faith quicken out of the numbness, the shock that you go into. And people don't always have to become Catholic again
Mhm.
once they have a relationship with you, but you become a really important friend. I would say I would consider you one of my dearest friends at this point, and I know enough people in the Brooklyn diocese to say the same. Where that the offer of friendship goes very deep, um, which is why it's a strange title. But talk a little bit, if you would, about the Brooklyn diocese. Let's say now. So we're in 2020. Um, we've come through that decade. What kind of offerings do you make to survivors, who do want to explore reconnecting?
Um, so I think where I usually begin is just making myself available and just, saying, well, we have, if you're interested, there's therapy available for some people. That's something that has benefited them. I'm not saying it's a cure all, but for some people it benefits them, and we have therapy available, and I'll offer that option, which is to providers. It would not be me. I am not the therapist, but to mental health professionals that have experience working with trauma. They have to be trauma informed, trauma trained professionals. One of the other options that's available right now, and this is what's available right now because we've tried different things as well. Right now, I have a virtual men's support group available, and that's for survivors, male survivors of clergy abuse. We've tried other things. There was a very successful parenting group that was held for survivors. So it's for survivors that are now parents. And when you were mentioning before, we were talking about the effect on the family. So that was really something to address that with the
Yeah.
children as well as their partners, their spouses. Um, and I'm trying to think of all the different things that we
Well,
have.
you've got a great mass that people come to from, and is attended by, I think, every priest or any priest that can possibly get to it. What
Yeah, that was that
mass?
that was that's the Mass of Hope and Healing. It's an annual mass. Um, and that was I think that was kind of like one of the places where we started when we were developing victim
Mhm.
assistance ministry. There was no mass, and it was something with the group of we had a focus group, a group of survivors that, as I started presenting myself, hey, I'm the new person here. They were interested in speaking with me, so I asked them to come together as a group and just hear, okay, what's your experience of what's necessary, what's lacking right now, and that's the place where they started. So and it's important, and this is like social work 101 as well. But when you're working with a group, they need to tell you what they want. You don't go and tell them this is what you need.
Yeah,
So one of the things they said, one of the survivors said, and the group agreed, wouldn't it be nice for there to be an overwhelming response from the clergy and the diocese to attend this first Mass of Hope and Healing, because that would feel for us like, they're standing in solidarity with us. This issue is important and they're there with us. And so, that was kind of scary to me because
mhm,
I was like, oh no, if they don't come, like, I didn't want it to be another wound, you know.
right, right.
So, but they responded. It was an overwhelming response. Like I had chills in my body, I think, and my eyes welled up with tears because I was like, oh, they came. They came.
Yeah,
And as I kept on seeing more and more come in, I was like, wow, because because I understood how meaningful it was to this group that
yeah,
had worked on this. So it became our thing. Once a year, we're gonna have the Massive Hope and Healing. Here are your invitations. Give me your RSVPs. And everywhere that I can, I'm always okay. Here's the Massive Hope and Healing. I'm gonna see you there, right? So that was one of the things with the Massive Hope and Healing. And then we even had a year where we were able to invite, as I continued connecting with different survivors, even from out of town, we were able to invite survivors to take part and to come in person.
yeah.
Um, so
That's
that was
lovely.
that was an that was an amazing experience.
and people, now that it's sort of a tradition, survivors and their families get together. I remember we were having a big event, Luis and I, and a number, about 20 survivors, were having a big Spirit Fire event when we were meeting with a bunch of bishops too. But the night that broke between the two, you were live streaming the Mass, so there was this whole group of survivors huddled around Luis's tablet. It wasn't even a computer, and attending, because there's a lovely sense of community that comes from a Mass. Some people think of the Mass as almost a PR stint, but in fact it becomes a tradition and a community with a lot of love. There's a lot of hurt, but there's a lot of love. They don't, you know, one doesn't overshadow the other in any way. It's pretty amazing what your whole community of survivors have done with you together.
They're amazing. Absolutely. They're amazing. And you know, even the way that the Mass is geared, when we put our, you know, our flyers together, it's a Mass for all those impacted by sexual abuse in the church.
Right.
So it's not if you're the primary survivor or if a family, it's by all those. So the parishioners, all of those that have been part of our Catholic faith, that have been listening from the pews and at home on TV and seeing everything that's coming out, they're impacted and they're invited to be part of this.
I know, I go to the Masses, and I think I have to say I would really hope that more Catholics realize you can't heal unless you notice that the wound is there. And most easily, clearly stated, is that every Catholic has a broken heart around this, and that it really are places to come and heal together. That said, I did want to ask a little bit. You know, I've mentioned the friendship with you, and the love that the survivors have with you. What is it like? I mean, there's the title of Victim Assistance Coordinator, but what is it like really in the living of it to have such profound friendships of regard with survivors of clergy abuse?
It's actually an amazing gift that God has shared with me, quite honestly, because I think the journey as a victim assistance coordinator is quite unique as well. And my survivor friends can speak to that experience in a way that other people can't. So I think, you know, friendship is like a two-way street. So the same way where I have to, at times I find myself in a place where, okay, let me muster up my support to be able to help hold whatever my friend is going through. It kind of comes this way as well. Yeah. You know, so it has been definitely something that God has blessed me with along my way, you know, yeah. Because it's not, this topic is not, this issue is not something simple to deal with on many levels.
That's very true. And really, when you look at your path, and this is true of almost any victim assistance coordinator I know who works at the level that you do, you know, you couldn't have planned your experience better to be who you are now, when it goes way back to your first job and even to the priest who suggested social work to you. But all of us notice, both in our friends who are within the church and then also among ourselves, that it's almost as if God was leading all of us to have everything and all the experience needed to somehow serve the people who are trying to grapple with this, let alone heal with this. It becomes a very rare conversation. In saying that, what would you be, in your experience, what would you say that this church can gain from a friendship like you have with survivors? Not that people should go out and grab your closest victim and suddenly be a friend. We'll talk about rewounding before we close, but what are your observed gifts that survivors bring back to the church?
Um, I would say, you know, sometimes people in the church are afraid um, to have a conversation with a survivor, are afraid, or you know, what's that going to bring. But I think, you know, the survivors will speak to you honestly and tell you what what is needed in the church, you know, what is needed if we're actually serious about helping the church heal. Survivors will share with us what they have experienced as healing. You know, you don't have to go and grab at the air to try to come up with stuff. No, just listen to a survivor and tell them, look, this has helped me. And so, you know, it helps you really put something authentic and real and actually pastoral together in order to respond to survivors, if you actually want to do that. You know, and I keep on qualifying it with that, because we know that people can come up with great ideas like, oh, here's this great program, but it it will only be something great if you're actually hearing what survivors need and putting that into action. That's when it really develops and it's a real ministry. Um, so that you know, that feedback that you get from survivors, and also you know, it's just, to me it's just a great honor that someone who has to be so guarded about who they trust, you know, and who they befriend, actually was able to do that with me, you know. And yeah, and survivors in this ministry as well, survivors can also help you bridge the gap to other survivors, you know. So that's one of the things that I only, of course, with the survivors who are comfortable with it. If I come across someone new and they're coming forward for the first time, that's something that I can offer them. If you might feel more comfortable speaking to another survivor, just let me know, and I may be able to connect you with someone. And I'm only able to do that because of the survivors that I have been able to establish a relationship with. That
Yeah.
they say, okay, I'm available to do this.
The beauty of that, and I do want to bring this up when we speak, is that especially now that it seems that Catholics now want to get involved, and lay people are motivated by, for whatever reason, possibly after the 2018 year of so many things, um, and more survivors are being rewounded because people are approaching survivors head on. But you're talking about a real care, letting a new survivor or a new person in the program talk to other survivors, people who understand how to talk to and understand the reactions survivors have. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Um, I think that when one survivor tells another survivor, um, I'm going into that dark place, the other survivor understands what that means, understands what that means, and and can respond can respond more appropriately to that, I think, than someone who might not have the experience of going into a dark place, and can give space as well for that survivor to go through their process
Yeah.
and come back out. Um, so so I think that's a very unique way that survivors can relate to each other. Um, yeah, my
No,
mind's going in another way. So I'll let you continue guiding me from here.
okay. Okay. And the other piece of that is that, Well, Spirit Fire is sometimes we're working with parishes and other groups and dioceses, and people will ask us about what our program is, what the 5 steps are, what's the perfect presentation deck. But really, Jasmine, you've described what we offer, which is one of friendship and listening and interaction over certain topics to let the people become, not us, not our program, but the people to become more deeply grounded in their ability to work with survivors. I think as we wrap this up, I'd like to just point out you've been immersed in dealing with survivors, both who were they were children and they were adults and they were outside of the church. And then you came in and worked as a victim assistance coordinator with many survivors of clergy abuse. A lot of people struggle with the idea that there would be a distinction. And I've even heard, some pretty sarcastic points of view about that. Um, we feel a oneness and we really welcome other survivors into our group for healing, but there are distinctions. I don't know, do you have any insights to offer to people? It's not like survivors of clergy abuse are an elite group, but there are some unique issues that go with.
Yeah, there's definitely, especially with survivors of clergy abuse. I mean, having the experience, having a traumatic experience of sexual abuse is it is intense as it is, yet when it's perpetrated by someone who represents the faith, who represents God, it, who that question of then who do you turn to for consolation and comfort and to try to even begin to understand why could this happen. The fact that the abuse was perpetrated by a cleric rips a whole other piece away from a survivor. And I'm not saying that someone who has been abused by someone that's not a cleric doesn't have deep wounds to their faith as well. Yes, but the fact that that person that perhaps can facilitate healing has been that person, that figure has been perverted, and destroyed. So where do you go? Who do you reach out to? And it's very difficult to go back to the church and then see, who a cleric. That's who I'm going to reach back out to.
Yeah.
So I think that's one of the difficult pieces that really is different in ways from survivors that where it was another perpetrator.
Thank you. And I do think it's also important for people to remember hearing that. It's a really important truth. It's also important for priests to realize that indicates a crucial importance for them. And even in the appropriate trauma-informed pastoral care that can be given, it can be extremely healing too. This isn't some place to give up. This is a place to just learn a little more, form one's spirit a little more, and become even more all of us than we were before. And Jasmine, this has just been wonderful. Is there anything else that you would like to share as we wrap up your generous time today?
Just to add a little bit more to where we just ended, to me, just when a survivor actually gets to a place where they're open to even dealing with someone who is a member of the clergy, like that is a big moment. That is a big moment, a big that I don't want other members of the clergy to just be afraid, or this is everything that they're thinking of me right now. No, the fact that they're actually still approaching, that there's an openness there, that can provide room for a lot of healing. That can. Yeah. And even if it's just listening. even if it's just listening.
It's so true. And again, I'd like to emphasize that this isn't a call for priests to become more timid. This is an encouragement for priests to realize how much good you can do. If a bad seed can cause this much working against the Holy Spirit, imagine what can be done for a holy priest, a good man working with the Holy Spirit.
Yes,
And we're telling you that, and that's really important too.
absolutely.
So thank you, my friend. It's really wonderful to see you and to talk with you.
Thank you,
Thank you
likewise.
very much.
You're welcome.